the kitchen hummed with life. The soft hiss of oil in the pan, the rhythmic chopping of knives, and the occasional clink of utensils filled the air. It was just another afternoon at the small, bustling bistro on the edge of the city, where the work was hard, the hours long, and the customers coming and going like clockwork. But today, the atmosphere was different. There was a palpable tension, an air of excitement, that wasn't there the day before. Anna, the quiet woman behind the counter, moved between the stations with practiced ease. Her brow furrowed in concentration as she pulled fresh vegetables from the walk-in fridge. She had been working at the bistro for months now. Her job was simple enough: prep work, washing dishes, occasionally helping with plating, but no one really paid her much attention. She kept to herself, always a step behind, always in the background. But today was different. Today, something was going to change. It all started with a joke. A new hire, one of the servers, walked into the kitchen with a mischievous grin plastered on his face. "Hey, Anna," he said, leaning against the counter. "I bet you can't cook something special for us. Just whip something up off the cuff. Show us what you've got." The others in the kitchen turned to look. It wasn't like anyone was particularly interested in her skills. They didn't know about them. They didn't know who she really was. But it was harmless fun. A bit of laughter, a few jokes, and they'd all go back to their usual routine. Anna raised an eyebrow but didn't answer immediately. She wasn't one to engage in idle conversation. She preferred to let her actions speak for themselves. But this challenge, however casual, was something that struck a nerve. She knew this was no ordinary dare. It was something more, a challenge that would reveal far more than they ever expected. The server tossed a small basket of random ingredients on the counter. "Go ahead, Anna. Impress us. Show us what you've got." The others laughed, not taking him seriously. The ingredients in the basket were simple: a few vegetables, a piece of chicken, some herbs, and a few pantry staples. It was nothing special. To anyone else, it would have been an easy task. But Anna, well, she saw the potential in those basic ingredients. She had always known how to transform something ordinary into something extraordinary. Without a word, she grabbed the basket, her fingers lightly brushing over the vegetables. There was a quiet confidence in the way she moved. She wasn't in a rush. There was no need to impress them, not yet. But she understood the power of this moment. She had to show them, not just how good she was, but how different she was. She began to work. The knife flashed as she sliced through the vegetables with a precision that made even the most experienced cooks in the room pause. The chicken was deboned and marinated with ease. The herbs, cut fresh from the garden, added a fragrance that filled the room and made everyone stop talking. The sizzle of the pan as she placed the chicken on the heat was like music, and as the oil began to shimmer, she added the vegetables, the spices, and the secret touch that would make it unforgettable. The group of colleagues standing around the kitchen had started to murmur among themselves. At first, it was just a light-hearted comment here and there. "She's doing well. Looks like she might actually be good at this." But as Anna continued, the mood in the room shifted. The food she was preparing wasn't just good, it was spectacular. The colors were vibrant, the aroma filling the air like nothing they had ever smelled before. Each motion, each stir of the pot, was done with a kind of grace and precision that seemed far beyond the casual cook in front of them. Someone in the corner whispered, "Is she really that good?" And that was when it hit them. Anna wasn't just making a meal. She was crafting an experience. A perfect harmony of flavors, textures, and scents. Every move was deliberate, every choice was calculated. They were no longer watching someone cook, they were watching someone perform an art form. But no one said anything. The kitchen was eerily silent, all eyes on Anna as she worked. The pressure, the tension, was rising. Finally, when the dish was ready, she placed it in front of them without a word. The others, still in disbelief, gathered around the counter. They weren't sure what to expect, but it wasn't this. The food was served on a simple plate, garnished with fresh herbs and drizzled with a perfectly balanced sauce. It didn't look extravagant. It didn't need to. It was just perfect. The first person took a bite. He didn't speak, just chewed thoughtfully. His eyes widened. He set the fork down. What is this?" His voice trembled with shock. Another colleague took a bite, then another. One by one, their faces lit up with surprise. It was like they had tasted something beyond their comprehension. Something otherworldly. This wasn't just a good meal. This was a revelation. The room fell into a stunned silence. Is it that good?" someone finally asked, breaking the stillness. But no one answered. There was no need. The looks on their faces said it all. "I've never tasted anything like this," one of the servers finally whispered, as though trying to comprehend what had just happened. That was when the door swung open. The head chef, a tall man in his 50s, entered the kitchen with a sense of urgency. He stopped when he saw the plate of food in front of the group. His eyes narrowed. "Who made this?" His voice was low, almost as if he already knew the answer. Anna looked at him, her eyes meeting his with a quiet confidence. She didn't need to say anything. She didn't have to prove herself to anyone. The chef's gaze shifted between her and the others. "Anna," he began, his voice trailing off as recognition flickered in his eyes. You're her, aren't you?" The others stared at him, confused. "Her? Who is she?" Anna stood there, still as a statue. 1,000 thoughts seemed to race through her mind. How much longer could she keep this secret? How long before the truth came to light? But it didn't matter. Not anymore. They needed to know. "Yes," she finally said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of everything she had been hiding. "I'm her." The room was still. Everyone froze. "I'm a 10-time culinary champion." And with those words, everything changed. The chef's eyes widened in shock. The others stared at her as if she had just revealed she was from another world. The whispers started immediately. Some were in disbelief, others in awe. The whole room felt as if it had suddenly shifted, and the tension in the air grew thick. The once casual challenge had just turned into something far greater. Anna didn't wait for them to process. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving them in stunned silence. The group stood there for several moments, unsure of what to do next. "Wait," someone whispered. "How did we not know? How did we not see it?" The chef shook his head slowly, his mind racing. "She's been here for months. We've worked with her every day. And we never even knew who she really was." It was almost too much to take in. The rumors started to spread like wildfire. Everyone who worked in the bistro was talking. Everyone who had ever tasted her food was asking questions. No one could quite believe what they had just learned. And as the evening wore on, Anna's name became a subject of heated discussion, both in the kitchen and beyond. But Anna was already gone. She wasn't there to answer questions. She wasn't there to give them the answers they so desperately wanted. She was a mystery, a culinary genius hidden in plain sight. And no one knew where her story would lead. The following morning, Anna did not come to work. She hadn't called in, hadn't sent a message, and when the others arrived at the bistro, they all immediately noticed the absence. It was like the air in the kitchen had shifted overnight, growing dense with curiosity and uncertainty. The usual chatter was missing, replaced by hushed conversations and confused glances exchanged between the staff. "I haven't seen her," one of the servers muttered, glancing toward the door as if expecting Anna to walk in at any moment. "She's probably sick, right?" another one offered, trying to dismiss the unease growing among them. But deep down, they all knew the truth. It was more than that. Anna's disappearance wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't just an off day. Something had happened the night before. Something that none of them were ready for. Something that had shattered the illusion they'd all built around her. As the hours dragged on without word from Anna, the whispers among the staff grew louder. No one dared to speak of what had been revealed the night before, the truth of Anna's secret identity as a 10-time culinary champion. It was far too unbelievable. They hadn't known who she really was. None of them had even suspected it. For months, Anna had worked alongside them, blending in like a shadow, until the moment she had casually dropped the bombshell, and the world they knew had fallen apart. The head chef, Ben, paced in his office. His thoughts were scattered, the weight of Anna's revelation gnawing at him. He'd been a professional in the kitchen for over 30 years. He'd trained with the best, competed with the best, and for the first time in his career, he felt outclassed. His pride stung as he recalled the way he dismissed Anna, thinking she was just a quiet, unassuming worker in the kitchen. He had no idea. He knew Anna's skills had been exceptional, but this was something else. 10-time champion? It made no sense. How had she hidden such a massive part of her life from them all? His phone buzzed on the desk. A text from one of the servers. Any word from Anna? He sighed and rubbed his temples. He hadn't heard from her either. Not since she'd left the kitchen last night. He typed a quick response, no. I'll try calling her later. But deep down, he knew that wouldn't help. Whatever Anna was dealing with, it was bigger than just a simple absence from work. Later that day, after the lunch rush, a sense of quiet anxiety settled over the bistro. No one dared to bring up Anna's absence again, but the air was thick with the unspoken question, where is she? Then, just as the clock struck 4, the door swung open with a sharp creak. Ben looked up from the pass, his heart skipping a beat. Standing there, in the doorway, was Anna. Her appearance startled everyone. She looked different. There was a weariness in her eyes, something heavy in her posture. She was no longer the woman who blended into the background, the quiet worker in the corner. Today, she was an enigma. Someone who had stepped out of the shadows and into the light, but only just enough to raise more questions than answers. Anna's gaze swept across the room. She paused for a long moment, as though taking in the weight of the stares and whispers that were already swirling around her. Then, without a word, she walked into the kitchen. Ben stood frozen for a second before he quickly moved to catch up with her. He found her standing at the prep counter, setting down her bag without looking at him. Her silence felt like a wall between them. Anna, Ben's voice was cautious, uncertain. Where have you been? We've been worried about you. Anna turned to face him, her eyes still heavy with something unspoken. I just needed some time to think, she said quietly. Ben waited for her to continue, but when she didn't, he pressed on. I don't get it. You just dropped that bomb on us last night. A 10-time champion? And then you disappear? Anna, what's going on? She didn't look angry, but there was something in her expression that kept him at a distance. I didn't disappear. I just left. I needed some space, Ben. To breathe. Ben frowned. This wasn't like her. Anna had always been composed, calm, almost distant. But now, there was something in her eyes that told him there was more to her story than she was letting on. He had to know. Anna, he said gently, we're a team here. You don't have to hide from us. Whatever's going on, we can help. For the first time, Anna seemed to soften. She gave a small, reluctant nod and then sighed. I'm not hiding from you, Ben. I don't know how to explain all of this. She stepped away from the counter, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed them over her apron. I wasn't always who I am now, she continued, her voice low. I've spent so much of my life running from that part of me. The part that's a champion. The part that's different. Ben took a step closer, his curiosity piqued. Why would you run from it? Anna met his gaze, her expression a mix of sadness and defiance. Because being a champion means being in the spotlight. It means expectations. Pressure. I didn't want that. I wanted peace, something normal. I didn't want the fame, the recognition. I just wanted to cook because I love it. Not because people expect me to be something bigger than I am. Ben was stunned. He had never considered the possibility that Anna's decision to work in the bistro had been born out of a desire to escape. To leave behind the very thing that had made her great. To live a quiet life, unburdened by the weight of her accomplishments. I had to disappear, Ben, Anna said, her voice trembling now. I couldn't handle it anymore. I couldn't be that person anymore. I just wanted to live a life without all the pressure. Ben stood there, unsure of how to respond. He wanted to tell her that she didn't have to run, that she was more than just a champion. But he didn't know if she would believe him. He didn't know if she would ever feel like she could embrace who she truly was again. As he looked at her, he realized something. Anna was far more than just the quiet woman in the kitchen. She was a survivor, a woman who had fought to build a life beyond her accolades, beyond the expectations that had defined her for so long. But no matter how hard she tried to bury it, her true self was still there, lurking beneath the surface. Maybe, Ben said slowly, you don't have to run anymore. Maybe it's time to let people see you for who you really are. Anna shook her head. You don't get it, Ben. It's not that easy. I've spent years hiding from who I was. And now, after last night, the world knows. I can't just go back to being who I was. I can't erase the past. Ben stepped closer, his voice softer now. You don't have to erase anything, Anna. You just have to decide what you want for yourself. What you want to be. It's not about the past. It's about now. The silence between them stretched, heavy and thick. Anna's shoulders slumped slightly as if the weight of her decision was finally beginning to sink in. She wasn't ready. She wasn't ready to face the world as the woman they all thought she was. But deep down, she knew that the time was coming. The truth, once revealed, couldn't be hidden away again. And just like that, the tension in the room shifted. Anna had started to face the truth about herself. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing: nothing would ever be the same again. And as Ben walked away, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Something that would change not only Anna's life but all of theirs. The clock ticked on. Time didn't wait for anyone. And soon, the world would know the truth. The days following Anna's return to the kitchen were tense. She had come back, but the change in her was undeniable. No longer just the quiet worker who kept her head down, Anna now carried the weight of her own secret with her, one that had begun to leak out, one conversation, one glance at a time. It was clear that the silence she'd wrapped herself in was breaking. She was no longer hiding in the shadows, and the world outside the kitchen had started to take notice. She was still trying to process the reality of her situation, but the people around her were already pushing for answers. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Ben had noticed it the most. His words had offered her some comfort that day in the kitchen, but they hadn't changed the course of events. Anna was a champion. She was no longer just an ordinary woman who enjoyed cooking. She was a woman whose past had caught up with her in the worst possible way. And now, it was almost impossible for her to hide. It was as if the world, with its cameras, its relentless curiosity, was breathing down her neck, waiting to expose the parts of her she had so carefully buried. It was almost surreal. One moment, Anna had been the heart and soul of the bistro, quietly making her mark. The next moment, she was a mystery that no one could resist trying to unravel. It had started with one phone call. A reporter from the local news station had reached out, asking for an interview. The restaurant had been buzzing with the news that Anna's identity had been revealed. The culinary champion they had all worked with for months was no longer a secret. And the media had picked up on it quickly. A woman with a hidden past, a chef who had deliberately kept herself out of the spotlight, now thrust into the very public eye she had tried to avoid. It was a sensational story. At first, Anna had declined the interview, thinking that if she ignored the media, it would eventually go away. But she was wrong. As more reporters showed up at the bistro, demanding answers, as social media exploded with questions about her past, the pressure only mounted. People wanted to know more. They wanted to know how a woman who had won 10 prestigious culinary competitions could be hiding in plain sight, working in a small, unassuming restaurant. That's when Anna finally broke. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a public announcement. It was just a quiet conversation, behind closed doors, with Ben. She stood in the small office they used for prep, her back to the window, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. "I can't do this anymore," Anna whispered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't hide from this anymore, Ben. I don't know what to do." Ben stood there, arms folded, watching her. He could see the strain in her face, the tears that had started to gather in the corners of her eyes, the subtle tremor in her hands. "You don't have to do it alone," he said softly. "We'll figure this out together." She let out a shaky breath and slowly turned to face him. "I've tried to run from it. I've tried to pretend that the past doesn't matter. But the truth is, Ben, I've been lying to myself." Ben watched her carefully. "What do you mean?" She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath before she spoke again. "Winning all those competitions, all those awards, it didn't make me happy. It just made me more isolated. I thought that if I could just win enough, prove myself enough, I'd find something real. But all I found was emptiness." Ben nodded, but he wasn't sure where she was going with this. "So, you left all that behind? You left it all for this?" Anna looked away, biting her lip. "No. I didn't leave it behind. I ran away. I thought I could just disappear, that I could hide in a small restaurant and no one would ever know. But it didn't work. It's never worked. I've been living in a lie, Ben. And now, everyone knows. They know who I am. What I am." Ben didn't know how to respond. He didn't understand why Anna had chosen to shut herself off from the world she had worked so hard to become a part of. But as she spoke, he began to see the weight of her actions, the years of pushing away the very thing she had worked for, only to find herself trapped in a life she didn't want. The reality of it began to hit him. Anna had been hiding for a long time, running from something that she could never outrun. She had been living in the shadows of her own success, afraid to face the truth. "I can't go back to that world," Anna said, her voice shaking. "I can't go back to the competitions, the media, the pressure. I just want to be normal. I just want to cook for the love of cooking." Ben understood her desire to escape. He understood the need for peace, for something that wasn't weighed down by the expectations of others. But he also knew that running from the past would never bring her the peace she was searching for. "I'm not saying you have to go back to that world, Anna," Ben said slowly. "But you don't have to run from it either. You've built something here, at this restaurant. You've found something real. You found people who care about you." Anna looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mix of gratitude and doubt. "But can they really care about me, Ben? Can anyone care about the woman who's been pretending to be someone she's not?" Ben smiled softly. "They don't care about the champion you were. They care about the person you are now. The person who's in this kitchen, working alongside them, doing what she loves. You don't have to pretend to be anyone else. Not here. Not anymore. Anna's shoulders relaxed, just a fraction. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Ben could see it now, he could see the faintest glimmer of hope in her eyes. Maybe it wasn't too late for her to come to terms with who she was. Maybe it wasn't too late to stop running from her past and find a way to live with it. But just as she was starting to open up, just as the walls she had so carefully built began to crumble, a knock came at the door. A reporter's voice filtered through the wood, "Anna, we need to talk." The weight of the world shifted again. Anna tensed. She froze. The reporters were back. It wasn't over. It was never over. Ben looked at her, his face hardening. "Do you want to go out there?" Anna swallowed hard. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. She had made her choice. The past had come for her, and there was no hiding anymore. With a deep breath, Anna nodded. "Let's go." As the two of them stepped into the main dining room, the reporters stood waiting. They weren't just from the local station now, the news had spread, and the crowd had grown. Cameras flashed, questions were fired from all directions, and for the first time in a long while, Anna felt like she was standing on a stage, naked to the world. "Anna," one of the reporters called out. "How does it feel to be exposed as a 10-time culinary champion?" Another voice chimed in, "Do you regret hiding your true identity? Will this change how people see you?" The questions kept coming, fast and relentless. But Anna stood there, her eyes sweeping across the room, meeting Ben's gaze for a fleeting moment. Then, she turned to face the cameras. And for the first time, she spoke the truth. "I didn't want to hide," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But I needed to find something more than just success. I needed to find myself." The reporters fell silent. The questions stopped. And for that moment, Anna knew she had finally stopped running. The aftermath of Anna's revelation was not what anyone expected. The cameras stopped flashing, the reporters dispersed, but the questions didn't end. In the weeks that followed, the bistro became a place of quiet contemplation rather than loud celebration. People came in, not just to eat, but to witness a story unfold that was far greater than just a woman hiding behind a kitchen counter. They wanted to see how Anna would move forward, how she would navigate this new reality, and whether she could ever truly reconcile the woman she had been with the person she had become. But Anna knew, deep in her heart, that the world outside the bistro had shifted. Her world had shifted. There had been a time when Anna had craved the spotlight, when the idea of competing and winning had seemed like the only way to feel validated. Her 10 titles, her spotless record, they had all been part of the armor she wore. A shield that protected her from her own fears. But the moment she stepped away from that life, a new battle began. This time, it wasn't the pressure of the competition. It wasn't the spotlight. It was something deeper, something more personal. It was the battle to find peace with herself. It was early in the morning when Ben found Anna standing by the window, looking out over the quiet street. She was different now, no longer the same woman who had entered the bistro months ago. She had shed the layers of secrecy, the weight of the false identity she had carried for so long. But there was still an undeniable sadness in her eyes, a longing that seemed to pull at the very core of her being. "Hey," Ben said softly, stepping closer. "You okay?" Anna didn't turn to face him immediately. She kept her gaze fixed on the street, where the first light of day was creeping over the horizon. Finally, she spoke, her voice low. "I never realized how much I was running from." Ben stayed silent, not interrupting, letting her find the words she needed. "I thought if I won enough, proved enough, I could escape everything," Anna continued, her voice shaking slightly. "But I was just running away from myself. From the person I really am." Ben leaned against the counter, watching her closely. He knew there was more to her story than what had been revealed, but he didn't push her. Anna had opened up about the competition, about her desire to step away from the pressure, but the deeper reasons for her retreat were still hidden. "I'm not a champion anymore," Anna said suddenly, her voice gaining strength. "I'm just me." Ben smiled softly. "That's all anyone ever needed you to be." The silence between them was heavy but comfortable. For a moment, they both allowed the weight of the conversation to settle. But then, something shifted. The door to the bistro opened, and Anna turned to find a familiar face standing in the doorway. It was Marissa, one of Anna's old colleagues from the world of competitive cooking. Marissa had always been a part of Anna's life before the secrets had taken hold, and her presence now was a reminder of everything Anna had tried to leave behind. Anna's breath caught in her throat. "Marissa," she whispered, her heart racing. "What are you doing here?" Marissa stepped forward, a look of genuine concern on her face. "I had to see you, Anna. I couldn't just sit back and watch you disappear." Anna's chest tightened. She hadn't expected anyone from her past to come looking for her. She had thought that once she left the world of competitions, she could bury it all. But here was Marissa, her past brought back into the light. "I thought you were done with all of this," Anna said softly. "I thought you'd moved on." Marissa shook her head. "I never moved on. I just let you go. I figured you needed space to find yourself, but now I see you're struggling. You're not just hiding from the competition, Anna. You're hiding from something much bigger." The words stung, but Anna knew they were true. She had been hiding from herself. From the expectations of others. From the constant pressure to prove herself. And now, with everything out in the open, it felt like she was drowning in the reality she had spent so long avoiding. "I don't know if I can go back to that world, Marissa," Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can ever be that person again." Marissa stepped closer, her expression softening. "You don't have to be. You just have to find a way to forgive yourself." Anna looked up at her, surprised by the words. "Forgive myself?" "Yes," Marissa said gently. "You've been carrying this burden for so long, believing that being a champion was the only thing that mattered. But that's not true. You've lost sight of the fact that you're more than just your accomplishments. You're a person. A real, living, breathing person who deserves happiness." The words hung in the air, and Anna could feel them sinking into her heart. But there was a part of her that resisted. How could she let go of everything she had worked for? How could she just walk away from the titles, the recognition, the fame? "I don't know how to let go of it," Anna whispered. "I don't know how to stop running." Marissa smiled faintly. "You start by forgiving yourself. And then, you take one step at a time. You've already started by coming back here. This place is your new beginning. This is where you start." Anna's mind raced. She had always been afraid of letting go, afraid of losing the only identity she had ever known. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she had already lost herself in the pursuit of something that didn't matter. The titles, the awards, they hadn't made her happy. They hadn't brought her peace. It was the simple, quiet moments she had found in the kitchen at the bistro that had begun to heal her. She turned to Ben, who had been silently observing the exchange. "I'm scared, Ben," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm scared of what happens next." Ben stepped forward, his eyes filled with compassion. "You don't have to do this alone, Anna. You have us. You have this restaurant. You have a new life waiting for you." Anna took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't defined by past victories. A future where she could simply be herself, without the weight of the past bearing down on her. "Maybe this is where I'm supposed to be," she said softly, a sense of clarity washing over her. "Maybe I can build something new here. Something real." Marissa nodded, a proud smile crossing her face. You already have. Anna's heart felt lighter as the words settled within her. The bistro had become her sanctuary, a place where she could start over, where she could be the person she was meant to be, free from the constraints of the past. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be days when the weight of the past would threaten to pull her under. But she had the strength now to fight it. And more importantly, she had the support of those who believed in her. As the sun set over the bistro, Anna stood in the kitchen once again, ready to embrace whatever came next. She wasn't the woman she had once been, and that was okay. She was something better. A woman who had found the courage to face her past and let go of the things that no longer served her. And in doing so, she had discovered the most important lesson of all, that true happiness came not from titles or accolades, but from the freedom to be herself. The story had come full circle. The past was no longer a shadow looming over her, it was simply a chapter in her life. And as she moved forward, Anna knew that the future was hers to write. The journey was just beginning.